Right. Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. My name is Utkarsh Saxena. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Adalat AI, which is a legal tech startup that builds AI solutions for courts in India. And so this topic is on my mind continuously because building safe and trusted AI, as you can imagine, in our context, in our setting, and that too at population scale for a country like India is a very critical requirement. And so I'm absolutely thrilled to be able to have this conversation this morning with an extremely diverse set of panelists and experts who bring a range of opinions, all the way from policy, governance level guidance at like 30,000 feet to deep in the trenches and the tunnels of where the work is actually happening and where it's being deployed. So to start things off, I'll do quick introductions of the panel and then open it up for a discussion. First, we're being joined by Asaf Azdilevich. Hopefully, I didn't butcher the name, who's the Senior Director Solutions for Architecture at NVIDIA. Asaf is deep in the trenches doing this work with actual government partners, private enterprises, and safety and trust is therefore highest on his mind and for the organization in general. And so we'll get a good sense of how this looks like in the trenches and what is it that they need from the governance and policy ecosystem, and what is it that the governance and policy ecosystem needs from private players to kind of make this actually a reality on the ground. So thanks so much, Asaf, for being here with us this morning. Next, we are joined by Dr. Tapan Sahu, who is from Maruti Suzuki, is the Executive Officer for Digital Enterprises there, and leads all the initiatives there at the intersection of digital transformation and cybersecurity, which is also a big question in this space, especially when you work in sovereign functions, sensitive areas where there's a lot of vulnerabilities to cyber attacks, and would love to hear that perspective as well. Next, great honor to be joined by Professor Raj Reddy, who's a professor at Carnegie Mellon University, but wears many hats. Absolutely. Turing Award winner, founder of IIIT Hyderabad, has built, in some sense, the tech ecosystem here. Thank you so much, Professor Raj, for actually being here with us this morning. And last but not the least, Benedict McCon-Cooney. Ben brings in that governance and kind of policy perspective to understand what is it that institutions, the policy establishments, the governance frameworks, and what do we need from them to actually provide a conducive environment that's on the one hand enabling these kind of solutions to actually take off, but also puts in the right guardrails. And so sometimes Ben will be the buzzkill here to actually ensure that this is done in a safe and ethical way. So thank you so much, everyone, for being with us here. To start things off, Ben, maybe let's start at the 30,000 feet view. To think about, as AI deployments increase, as they morph the way governance happens, it's kind of changing the way in which we think about governance, the way in which we think about the role of government in this space. And as I said, to balance that tricky balance between enabling actual deployments of AI solutions while also implementing the necessary guardrails and safeguards. How do you think of the governance framework here? And do you think it's going to change, and in what way should it change?
Super. Well, thank you for that. And well, I'm delighted to be here as well. And thank you for the Indian government for hosting. I think the reflection on this is almost, you could take this back to where we were 3 years ago with the first version of this AI summit, when it was focused on safety, and at a time when sort of the rocket ship of AI had gone up again, and politicians were sort of scrambling to really understand what this incredibly powerful new technology meant. And some of the early iterations of the thinking obviously were then focused on various forms of safety, including then at that point even like existential risk, which is the predominant part of the debate. Now, I think is obviously then people settled down a little bit and began to understand and basically interact with the technology in a different way. Some of then the policy landscape began to change. If you take then last year, it's the Action Summit, and this year it's the Impact Summit, right? And I think that also mirrors kind of where we've been with this technological wave from, right, okay, we've got these powerful LLMs that are general purpose technology. We think they're kind of magic. We don't quite know what to do with them just yet. But now, the last year, I would say, you've seen that adoption mindset change quite dramatically, right? And obviously we've seen the private sector go from more pilots into actually broader scale adoption and some now economic change with that. So I think in terms of what that means for sort of the governance and guardrails, I think actually where some of the countries landed was actually totally right. I think something like what happened in the UK, where you set up a safety institute, then the security institute, which kept a watch on the technology rather than rush to regulate as you began to understand what was happening, was correct. I think some of the other countries, let's say the European Union, went probably very quick into the regulation space and then is trying to then sort of almost row back from that. But I think, as we begin to see again this year, some of the, the team here speaking today will probably talk about this. I've been even, kind of mind blown the last couple of months at some of the pace of change with Claude Code and, with OpenClaw. I think it's actually going to press some of those adoption questions back into the political domain again in new ways. Now, what I think that means, I think there are different ways to look at this, and I think some of the sector-based regulation, whether that's looking at healthcare and liability, I think there's extremely sophisticated regulation in lots of this space as well. Some of it will have to be new as you begin to see things like AI doctors coming onto the market. But I think then the sort of the wider landscape for a little while will still just be on this, let's begin to learn from adoption, let's begin to basically analyze and continue to work with the companies on evaluating the risk. And then I would suspect as some of the powers begin to increase this year, we might see some of that shift again into a bit of a deeper form of regulation.
Super interesting. I have one follow-up there on the pace at which innovation is happening. It's a bit heady, and tech is just going to be faster than the policy regulatory landscape, and it sometimes feels like the gap between the two is just going to widen. And so how does traditional governance and policy actually catch up when the tech pace is being turbocharged by AI? Does the policy and governance pace also get turbocharged by AI to keep up, which is kind of a tricky situation to be in since that's what you're regulating?
Totally. Well, the pace of change between the private and public sector has always been of a different level, right? And if you look at the exponential growth in AI, that is the huge worry that state capacity can't keep up. And that's why I do think bringing technical components into government, like through the Security Institute, will change the locus. Now, I'll even talk from our own experience here. We decided as an institute last year that we're advising governments on how to keep pace of change, in regulation and policy around a lot of this. And, you have these incredibly powerful tools that can help you with that. So we actually built our own innovation lab, which is building policy tools, which can develop policy and analyze them at real time, bring in LLMs into how basically ministerial offices function, how they set strategy, because, a lot of the process of governing is actually just huge amounts of documentation, unstructured data, which LLM is extremely good at analyzing and giving you information on. So I actually think the way the state operates will change as a result of this. And I think it can give very powerful tools to how we actually build policy, how we develop that. But that will also change not only just the mindset of bringing more technical people into government, but also then working with the domain experts, a bit like, legal companies bring in legal experts alongside technological people to work together with each other to begin to build the systems that can move at the pace of change that the technology with. Now, that's always going to be a really arduous task, but I do think, government has to think about how we deploy these technologies to actually adapt to the change the way that the sort of the private sector is as well itself.
Super interesting. Thanks so much for that. So, we've started in the stratosphere a little bit at this 30,000 feet view. I want to take the plane straight down into the trenches to you, Asaf, where you're actually doing and building this work. And so there's one governance perspective, which is what Ben's talking about, which is the regulatory checks and balances. But you also need the regulatory enablers here to actually make this work on the ground. Governments, a lot of sovereign bodies will ask for on-prem deployments, AI infrastructure to enable sovereign functions. But what does that actually mean for someone like you architecturally? What are the prerequisites that you need from the governance and policy ecosystem to actually enable you to do this more effectively on the ground?
Thanks. So I'll start with the infrastructure, because I think this is the basics of the basics. Without it, nothing nothing will happen, right? So for us, trusted AI infrastructure basically is very tangible. It starts at the chip level with the latest GPUs and DPUs, which are designed for what we call confidential computing and hardware-grade isolation, basically separation between the network and the compute. That's basically disconnecting what you talked about, Raj, before that. And so basically, at the infrastructure level, you can verify what's running on the platform before exposing your sensitive data and models weights and so forth. That's one. And then we take this, encapsulate this security and move it through the entire stack, from the Kubernetes level to the GPUs operators, to the networking, to the storage. And then you get consistent security throughout the entire pipeline. So that's the basics of the basics, right? So for us, trusted AI infrastructure is basically something that you can verify. That's the main point, without compromise on performance and on the efficiency of the AI applications, the AI models.
Super interesting. I want to follow up a little bit with what we were discussing earlier, which is that you said there are some things that, for instance, in India, that you think are actually working well, and there are some things that aren't. And the Global South has its unique set of challenges as compared to the Global North. So can you talk a little bit about what are those things that are actually going well, that maybe countries need to keep doing and maybe emulate from what we are seeing here, and then maybe what are those gaps that need to complement those things going well?
Yeah. So what I told you before is that India has all the talent that it needs, right? We are working with across the industry. So basically, NVIDIA sees itself as the default AI platform across all the industries, right? If it's healthcare, if it's finance, if it's mobility, if it's government services, and so forth. All the industries that I mentioned, India is pretty much leading with solutions, right? We are working with hospitals, with financial bodies, with governments, with mobility companies, to come with frameworks and with reference architecture that will be translated to, at the end, to application for the public, right? India has it all. The only thing that India is missing is infrastructure. You can have all the talent, you can develop everything. You already successfully completed training of several foundational models, which are world-class foundational models, covering something like 22 languages, right? That's perfect. That's the training part of it. Now, once completing the training, now we will see so many applications, inferencing, that will basically use those trained models, right? And for that, you need a lot of infrastructure. And this is something that currently India is missing. So that's what we are looking for. We are waiting for, right, for India to ramp up on infrastructure, and then everyone will start using AI in India. Everyone. And the government is leading with it, with the government services, right? So,
great, super helpful. I want to use what you said about how India has a lot of talent and talent is a big piece of this whole conversation. And we couldn't have anyone better but Professor Reddy to actually talk about the talent conversation, because you've been a professor at Carnegie Mellon, you founded IIIT Hyderabad, kind of seen the university ecosystem in the US, led the establishment of the university ecosystem in India. And a big conversation now is around research, indigenous research, patents coming out from different countries. Where do you see the bottlenecks there for that research ecosystem, and what more do we need to do, India and other countries in the global south, to actually have more of this talent contribute directly to core R&D work and create the foundation models that are specific for our needs and actually serve our purposes?
So in research, I was very impressed to see all the startups in the NVIDIA booth in the exhibit, and amazed at the quality of the people and so on. But that's not surprising, Every year we have 20 million children that are born, that's 25 million. And if you take 1% of them, that's a lot of very intelligent people. So we have the resource. What we need to do is train them. And my view is we should start this with kindergarten. I was with the minister. I was saying every person, especially every child and every student, should have a smartphone with an NVIDIA chip or something, what I call petaflop and terabyte in your pocket. It's not there now. It may not be there for 5 years, but it'll get there. And the important thing is, how do we build these trustworthy and secure sovereign models that are personalized for each person, not even for the thing. So in order to personalize for each person, we need the training built into the sovereign model. It should continuously monitor what I'm doing and take the input from it and personalize the model for my particular purpose. If I'm a kindergarten student, it should know that I'm working on the following problems. I had the difficulty here, and other kindergarten students and other students having difficulty found a solution, and it should guide me to do that, right? So that is, I don't see how we're going to get there. So that is personal, trainable system that's always on and always learning and always working. Not, so in order for a system like that to be always on, always working, it'll consume a huge amount of energy. Right now, we don't have any solutions for the personal, sovereign AI model to do that, but I think it'll get there. We need people like Alex and NVIDIA and so on to do that, help us to do that. But there is a huge talent here, and we need to encourage them to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. When you were speaking, I was reminded of this report that's been going around recently on how, if you look at the number of foreign-born unicorns that have come out of the US, India's top of the list, which in a way could be a matter of pride for us. But one can't help but think of the counterfactual of what if all those bright people stayed back in the country and built opportunities for the country. And you obviously can't expect them. I mean, if I was in their place, the kind of opportunities I would have in other parts of the world may not be available here. So what is required to actually bridge that pipeline for these students coming out of universities, for them to have those opportunities here?
Thanks to Mr. Trump, I think all of them are coming back. So, but the important thing is when they come here, I've talked to many of them. They're actually making plans to come back. We need to create an ecosystem here where they can be given the right resources to do what they used to do or better, and given a challenge saying, we need for you to build a sovereign AI model for kindergarten students. Or not even generalized to kindergarten students. My child, personal kindergarten sovereign model for my child. What is it that I need? How does it get trained every day, get improved? All of those things have to be done, and these people can do it. Not people from abroad, people in the country already can do it.
Thank you so much, sir. Tapan, I want to come to you now. You know, in a sense, you are the one who's being affected by all these conversations, by the regulatory governance architecture, by the talent pool, by the GPU deployments and the infrastructure deployments. And that has serious implications for you, especially for your context, right? Because in mobility and manufacturing, AI failures are not just reputational failures. These have serious physical consequences, safety consequences. So can you talk a little bit about what changes when you deploy AI in your context and what that means for just safety and mobility in general?
I think I don't have to say that mobility has a large implication in terms of not only economic growth, but prosperity of people as well. When people move from point A to point B, safely, I think that's what is the most critical factor. So you rightly said, I think with respect to safe and trusted AI, when you talk of mobility sector, there are various layers that we need to look at. We need to look at how can people move more effectively, efficiently, and safely. Movement from point A to point B, be it goods or be it people movement. The second is that with respect to vehicles, I mean, I think there was a Niti Aayog report recently, a week back, which talks about India's ambition or aspiration for 2070 and how the powertrain mix is going to change. I mean, if you look at the electrified vehicles is going to be about 100% in some scenarios, in some segments. So that means all these vehicles will be connected in any case, because for electric vehicles and electrified vehicles, you need the charging infrastructure. You need to know where you are, where you can go and get charged. So when you have such a large scale of connected vehicles, millions and millions of vehicles on the road, that becomes a critical infrastructure for the country. And therefore, cybersecurity becomes all the more important. And with evolving AI and AI tools, and also, hacking as an industry using AI, that's another factor which you need to take care of. And I think that becomes all the more, again, very, very critical. The third, but another important factor which we need to look at is that when you talk of trust and safety, safe AI for mobility, I think we don't have to look at accuracy only. For example, for a population scale like India, 99% accuracy means 14 million decisions are wrong. You can't afford it. I mean, so you have to have explainable AI, governable AI, which corrects itself. If you look at our UPI infrastructure, for example, which is deployed in India, it's successful not because it's not correct or it's not this thing, but it is governable. So for mobility as well, I think we need AI philosophy and AI governance, which is manageable, which is governed well, and therefore trusted by people. So mobility, it's not scaling AI first and then bringing trust, but putting trust first and then bringing in AI at scale.
Yeah, no, very interesting about how you have to sequence this. But I'm just curious, when you talk about this very real risk of cybersecurity, which is also getting catalyzed, right? The threats are also getting equally catalyzed. What is it that you need from either the infra providers or from government or from policy ecosystems to actually be more resilient? I mean, it's easy to say that we need to ramp up our capabilities and protect our vulnerabilities, but what does that actually mean for you on the ground?
So that again, if you look at cybersecurity at scale, probably goes into 3 or 4 layers. Therefore, we not only need zero trust networks, we need zero trust models actually and governance as well. And that's number one. Number two, I think from an infra perspective, cybersecurity at infra layer. Then from a model development perspective, zero trust architecture. Then throughout the SDLC cycle, how are you taking care of cybersecurity, starting from coding to deployment? That also you need to look at. And last but not the least, I think you need to continuously have that threat monitoring with organizations like India's CERTIN and other people who are doing it, and also doing a red teaming. Keep continuously evolving. I mean, AI is a journey, and cybersecurity also is a journey. It will never stop. You are always on a treadmill. We have to keep running, and make sure that you are able to continuously detect threats and then take care of them as we go along.
The only concern is that the incline of the treadmill and the speed of the treadmill are both going up really, really fast.
Absolutely.
Which is making this extremely challenging. But thanks so much, Dr. Sau, for that perspective. Ben, I want to take all this and bring it back to you about how, in a way, the relationship with the between the public sector and the private sector is actually changing a little bit. There was a time when there could be an expectation that IT teams and digital teams within government could do some of the tech work and therefore be housed inside public sector. But now with these kind of applications, that's just becoming harder and harder. The AI talent pool is limited. It's not easy for the public sector to actually entice it. I've sometimes seen these peculiar situations where a lot of government bodies have bought the H100s and the H200s, and they have the GPUs, but then they actually can't operationalize them. And so what does it mean for the future of the public-private partnership? Does it mean that more of it actually may be housed outside of government just because it's such a hard technical challenge? Is that relationship going to change going forward?
So I think let's separate this out into a few different components. I think that's to some degree correct, but also at the same time, you also have incredibly powerful technologies that are much easier to use in some areas. So I think there's a few elements that governments need to sort out first, which is, number one, just simply your infrastructure and your data estate. I mean, as sort of mentioned, sovereign AI for lots of capabilities, whether that's in education, health, etc. I think they are inevitable and they should definitely happen in the future. I have a 2.5-year-old daughter who's already started playing around on Khan Academy, and it is unbelievable the way they're engaging with the technology. And that is something that I think every kid around the world should have access to, but that requires obviously governments to think about how they properly collect the curriculum, align it with technology providers, work all through that, and build the systems, whether that is your own digital ID, to make sure that you are tracked through that longitudinal aspect, so you're getting the personal learning, you're getting your personal healthcare. All of those aspects require a whole kind of new way of operating model of government to begin to utilize that. And I think even in the most sophisticated governments, how they thought about their digital infrastructure and data architecture is often very, very poor, and with little data sharing across government and extremely low quality across that. So I think there's a lot that government needs to do to almost get its house in order before it can really begin to utilize this. Now, I definitely think, though, that sort of compact between the public and private sector needs to be much deeper in these terms, just because if you looked at some of the previous ways of innovation, let's say the old era of Silicon Valley, move fast and break things, they basically wanted to ignore government. Government didn't really know what to do with them. And then when they did come around to engaging with them, they just hit them with a hammer. And that wasn't a productive relationship. Now, I think that relationship has begun to change because if I went to a politician, a president or a prime minister 5 years ago and said, right, what you need to do is put all of your data on the cloud, they'd be like, that's boring. But they are very interested and engaged with AI. And, you see the MOUs that are being signed with Anthropic, with OpenAI, all around the world. There is a kind of we need to get on and do something and work with these countries, and we need those capabilities in government to help us do that. Now, I should also say that is one thing that we are totally trying to do at the Institute, and hence why I said we built an engineering team, because some of that is just getting leaders and politicians up the curve to understand the technology and get curious about it and then begin to see the powers. I read an Economist interview with my Prime Minister early last year where he said, the question was a very simple one. Are you using ChatGPT? No, my kids are, though. that will not wash like in the near future, because the politicians have to be engaging with the technology, have to be understanding it, and the ones that do and master and harness it in that way will be the nations that rise and the ones that fall in the near future, because every history of technological development has seen the countries that begin to master that in a profound way, often not, it doesn't have to be the richest one at any given moment, will be the ones that will lead in the near future.
Yeah, no, that's super interesting. Just to follow up on that, so you do envision a future. I mean, right now, there are a lot of stopgap arrangements because governments don't have that internal capacity, but you do see a future where, just like they have internal IT teams, governments will have internal AI teams. The IT teams will basically be doing AI, and whatever, like we had our DPI moments for Aadhaar and UPI and for
Totally.
identity, the same will happen for AI as well inside government?
Yeah, and I mean, you've seen versions of this. Obviously, again, if you take something like the British government, we started with the Government Digital Service years ago, which then President Obama replicated in the US. The woman who's speaking after me, who works in my team, used to run the incubator for AI in the Prime Minister's office in the UK, which was an incredibly powerful team within the British government. And in the US government, again, this Trump might be sending some of the talent back to India. He's sending some back to the UK as well. But he is also bringing in a lot of talent from the technology sector in and around government, right? I think some of this might not be able to keep them in for 5 years, because when the equity and pay packets in the AI sector are so large, but you can definitely come in and get them doing tours of duty. And I think getting 5 engineers in a president or prime minister's office for a year probably will get you a lot further along the curve than having 50 sort of generalists that are still pushing Word documents and Excel spreadsheets around, because I can tell you what will be the future of delivery, and that's going to be based on building with technology, not from, again, sort of just lots of Word documents and prose being shuffled around government.
Yeah, no, fascinating. Asaf, if I could bring this to you now. When you build for infrastructure for population at scale, you must be seeing many sectors, finance, healthcare, justice, governance, police. I mean, there's a whole range of things. What are you seeing in this heterogeneity? How do they differ from each other? How are they very similar? And again, what is it that you need to address sometimes the more very peculiar, specific needs of some of these sectors?
So as I said earlier, the way that NVIDIA sees itself is, again, trusted AI platform across all those industries, right? We're not just providing powerful chips, but most important, we provide industry-specific solutions. So finance is different than mobility, right? And that's super important. At the end, nothing is general. Everything is domain-specific. So that's the reason that I said that we're working with hospitals, and we're working with mobility companies, and we're working with finance companies, and with governments. And every industry has its own reference architecture, has its own framework, has its own, sometimes has its own foundational model, right? Or we're just doing fine-tuning for this specific industry, right? But at the end, nothing is general. Everything is domain-specific. So that's something that we're doing that is clear already, right? We're also working with some leading institutes on translating cutting-edge researchers, right? AI research to translating into real use cases to be deployed at scale, which is also super important. That's that's basically the way that we see the industries. In mobility, for example, you rightly said that we would like to improve the safety of mobility. That's number one priority for us. That's what we're doing with automotive. And same, more advanced services for governments, and obviously to improve the healthcare services and so forth.
Yeah, fascinating. You were just talking about the kind of innovation that's very customized for sectors. And I was thinking about it, there's this whole conversation around how do you regulate tech for some of the externalities and challenges that tech might create. For instance, there's a lot of discussion around carbon footprint and the energy needs for infrastructure. But then there's another school of thought that often points out that actually it's tech itself and innovation itself that solves for some of these externalities and challenges, right? For instance, if you look at solar energy, a lot of the challenges that came with solar cells and like the pricing, etc., it's the tech innovation itself that eventually solved it by making it much cheaper. Do you think that's what's going to happen in the infrastructure space as well? That it's kind of going to be a tech problem and therefore a tech solution that solves it? Or do you think there's actually a policy framework required to bring into the optimization function some of the decisions around energy consumption and the carbon footprint conversation?
Well, I'm pretty sure that every step that we do, we will face challenges that will get their solutions, right? Number one challenge is power. We are missing power in the world, right? Some research is saying that we're missing a few tens of gigawatt by 2028, which is basically tomorrow, right? And the industry will need to find a solution for that, right? Obviously, government policies and stuff like this will need to be shaped, to support those. For example, the missing power, right? So that's basically what I think. I think that we will find more and more issues along the way that we will need to solve, and it will be a combination of industry and government policies and stuff like this.
Are you excited about the GPUs and space conversation? Do you think that's where this is eventually going?
Well, I can tell you that, first of all, yes. But I can tell you that a few years ago, Microsoft did an experiment, right? They took a tank and put it in the ocean, right? And it's working perfectly, right? But then the cost of maintaining of the maintenance is so high that you know that it's not scalable, right? So there are many researchers around how to improve the power and stuff like this. I don't think that it will be in the next 2-3 years.
Not in the next 2-3 years.
I don't think so.
But in the next 10 years?
Maybe.
Okay. Great. Thanks so much. Professor Reddy, if I could come back to you now. Population at scale has all this heterogeneity in the applications, right? Finance, governance, legal, all of those things. But it also has implications for a heterogeneity on the user's side. We are a diverse country, multiple languages, multiple requirements. How do you build safe AI for this kind of scale, for our kind of scale? And if you had a magic wand and you could kind of change a few things that could enable that, would be curious to hear your thoughts on that.
The government has an important role to play across all sectors. I want us to concentrate on the bottom of the pyramid, one child. What is it that child have to have as infrastructure, and how can that be secure and trustworthy? And think of a sovereign AI model that is not general for even for 10 people or the whole village. That's personal sovereign model. And it has to have some capabilities that don't exist today. It must be autonomic. That means it must be always on, always working, and always learning. It's collecting data about me and learning from that to build, add to the sovereign model that has to be secure and personal. It can't be just changeable to everybody else. So the question is, how will this system become my alter ego? Second, an assistant or a companion to do the thing. So one of the things you might have noticed if you're using AI models, if I'm prompting a question, they know what else you're doing, context, already. And based on the context, they say, you're looking at this, you're looking at that, and given that, I can give you the following. That has to happen for a child. You've been working on this problem, and you had difficulty here. Shall we work on this? And the question is, are we ready to give every child their own smartphone with their own sovereign model, which is their sovereign model, not the class, not the village, not the whole state? We haven't gotten there. This idea of personal, autonomic, and always on, always working, cognitive assistant. That's where we need to go.
Fascinating. What a vision of the future. This reminds me of the conversation from 20 years ago when, if someone said every person in every village in India should have a smartphone, a lot of people in policy would scoff at that, being like, that's an unrealistic idea, right? It requires infrastructure, hardware, it requires low-cost data, and yet here we are 20 years later where that's actually kind of happened, and tech has humbled a lot of those pessimistic projections.
The minister would disagree with you. This morning he told me, we already have 1 billion phones in India. The people are using AI. I said, that may be true, but they're all kind of going out. It's not sovereign AI model on your phone.
Exactly. No, exactly. That's what I was going with. And it seems like the next big hardware plus data plus software is this personalized kind of AI deployment on.
It has to be autonomic. It has to be autonomic in the sense, just like your heart beats without your telling it, this system must be always on, always working, always learning for you, to do the best for you.
And if you had to think of a timeline, it took us 2 decades to kind of solve the smartphone problem, put it in every person's hand with a data connection. What do you anticipate is the timeline for your vision, where I have a phone with an NVIDIA chip, with a GPU in it, and with a model that's personalized to my preferences?
Right. It will happen because parents are very interested in their children. If the society will come up with something they can buy, which is doing all these things for their child so that they can learn. One of the great things about teaching the child from the kindergarten onwards is by the time they graduate from school, they're AI experts. They know how to use it. And right now, we may pretend that everybody has a phone and so on. We don't have a clue on what does it mean to be AI literate. And in particular, we don't have a population which is willing to challenge critical thinking, and we need to kind of keep feeding kindergarten children and so on. One of these answers is wrong, the other two are right. Which is wrong? That means they have to think of which is right or wrong. Teaching that critical thinking is not there in our education right now. It's all rote learning. You can take the exam and get exactly the right answer.
Yeah. No, thank you so much. Fascinating, vision of the future, and only time will tell how quickly it materializes. Dr. Sahu, tying to what Professor Reddy was just saying, everybody wants AI for their child. And that can sometimes create a kind of Dutch disease that happened with oil, right? If you have oil in your country, that's all that you do and all you think about, and kind of neglects other innovation. You're in the automobile manufacturing space. AI is only part of the conversation, right? There's still a lot of other innovation that needs to happen, and you're seeing the startup ecosystem quite closely. Is there a concern that we are just only talking about AI and retrofitting AI into everything because it's hot and glamorous right now? And does that in any way compromise other innovation that's necessary at the same time?
If NVIDIA will come up with a personalized phone of this kind, they can participate with other people, whether it's Google or someone, and said, this is the phone that every child should have. You will sell 4 billion such systems globally.
I'll just carry forward what Professor Raz was saying. He's talking of n equal to 1. So at mobility space, we are looking at how do we serve consumers n equal to 1. How do we personalize things for the people? So you rightly said, and innovation is not only about AI, but AI is a great enabler. I think that's a great enabler. It's a great labeler as well. Because nobody knows nothing, everybody knows nothing, kind of thing. We are all learning in this space now. So what we're trying to do here is that, for example, why startups? I think if you look at India, 200,000 plus startups. If you look at organizations, the way they absorb energy, the way they adapt to change is very different from the high frequency change which is happening in the tech sector. The tech sector is high frequency change. Human mind or organizations or governments for that matter are not ready to adapt to the change at such a high frequency. And startups bring in that agility, bring in that speed of innovation, which is required for organizations or even government entities, public sectors, people at large, to ensure that we bring in that enthusiasm, bring in the energy, and make sure that we are able to adapt to the change. So we are looking at innovation, not only AI is of course one of the enablers, but AI is all about, it's not about technology, it's about a mindset change which is required. I keep saying, deployment of AI is 30% tech, 70% mindset. So we require a different mindset shift, like Professor was saying, we need to think about what's possible. We need to use it in most authentic way, not at hype. So how we are looking at it is, if I take Maruti Suzuki example, we have screened about 6,000 plus startups. And about 200 plus are engaged with us today. 60 are doing paid POCs and 32 have become our business partners. And half of them could be AI startups, but half of them are non-AI startups. They are into drones, but they're using AI technology. They could be into mobility solutions. They could be into so many other things. So the whole space of innovation is very, very wide. And I think AI can help us innovate it faster, if you look at that way.
Yeah, no. The saying that you're building the plane as you fly it seems so much truer in our times because of just the speed at which it's happening. I could keep asking questions all day. This is a treat, but it would be unfair and selfish of me to do that. I want to open it up to the audience in the last few minutes. I can already see a lot of hands going up. If there's a mic that can go around, please ask questions. I know we all have strong opinions, but if you could, rather than stating the opinion, ask a targeted question, and we'll take maybe 4 or 5 together and then just open it up to the panel to answer them.
Sir, my question is, do you think that for using AI, we need to keep a barrier that age of 23, after age of 23 only they need to use AI because it's reducing the critical thinking? And one more thing is for Dr. Sahu, sir, this is a special question. Can I know how the zero trust security can be used? Because we are trying to build multilingual offline systems for language communication around 7,000 plus languages via zero trust security so that AI cannot be trusted. So I would like to know more on it.
Can we take questions in a bunch and then we'll go one by one?
Hi, I have a question, especially I think picking from what you've been saying, Dr. Raj. I hear you very clearly mentioning that every individual needs a sovereign AI system, and I completely understand that. I have one concern though. Do you think that will make us more self-contained as people to have something that speaks to us the way we speak to ourselves, rather than giving us a third person perspective in our lives? Because that's why we speak to other people and research outside and study outside, because we need that exposure and that third perspective rather than just sitting with ourselves. What do you think about it? Thanks.
Thanks so much. I'm being told that we're tight on time, so we'll take just to these questions. Professor, do you want to go first?
So I think having a digital companion or AI companion does not prohibit you from interacting with your friends and your parents and the whole community. If it does that, one of the things your companion should be telling you is, you should be talking to people, you should network, you should work as a team. And one of the things you need to learn as a skill is teamwork. All of that is something your assistant should.
Quick answer to this thing. At multiple layers, we need to have the zero trust solutions while deploying AI. I'll explain you offline. I answered it earlier in my session.
Great. Thanks so much, everyone. It's such a delight to be here first thing in the morning, even before breakfast, and see a packed room. This just tells us how exciting this is. Thanks so much, Asaf, Dr. Sahu, Professor Reddy, and Ben for your time. Can you please give them a big round of applause?
Hello. Thank you so much for joining us and giving us the valuable insights. Hello. Yeah, thank you so much for joining us and giving us the valuable insights. We will be presenting you a small moment of appreciation from India Air.
Thank you so much, everyone.